My name is Jennifer Gray Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director of Rebuild North Bay Foundation. This podcast is specifically designed to bring you people who have been through what maybe you have just gone through or that you are concerned about. We created the podcast How to Disaster to show you the breadth and depth of humanity in the midst of this really terrible thing that happened. I wanted to do this podcast so that I could bring some of the most amazing leaders that I've ever known in my life to you. You may have just experienced a disaster, and you may be looking around and you are dealing with trauma and the shock of it. And you may be wondering, I don't know how to do this part. And so we purposefully made this podcast into different sections and different topics of recovery so that you could pick and choose what would work for you at that time. So welcome to How to Disaster, and thank you for giving us your time. Welcome to How to Disaster, the podcast. In this podcast, we try to show you how to recover, rebuild, and reimagine. And we do that through bringing you leaders, both emergent and formal, in the space of disaster. We like to amplify and elevate good people, good ideas, good systems in a way that hopefully you'll be able to take them and adapt them to work for you. Today, I'm so pleased to have Amy Bach. Amy Bach is the founder and executive director of United Policyholders. United Policyholders is a nonprofit that helps people who are looking to buy insurance or navigate the insurance process post-disaster. Amy's been on the forefront of not only helping people individually and communities recover, but also working to change the laws so that it's more fair, so that we have she is the place that you go if you want to know, like, how do I advocate? How do I make sure that not only like any kind of suffering that I have incurred doesn't happen for future people who in future disasters, but also like, how do we make this space so much better to navigate? I really admire Amy for a couple of reasons. I think, as you'll see, she has really great energy. There's also that she's been in this space for a long time. She's made a difference and she is tenacious. And I think so much of it comes from that energy. I really admire Amy because I know what it's like to serve a disaster affected community when everybody rushes in initially and then they rush out about a year later, maybe 18 months. Very few organizations stay for the long term. United Policyholders does stay for the long term. So they are there not only before, during, and after a disaster, but they're still there when a lot of homeowners are finally looking up about a year to 2 years post-disaster and making their decision to rebuild. And there's really no more important decision than how to, deploy your insurance funds. Do you have enough? Chronic underinsurance is just epic in this country. It's an extra. It is, people don't think it's going to happen because they're normal. And until it happens to you, then really understanding your insurance policy is something that most of us don't have the time or won't take the time to do. I asked Amy to come on here today because, we don't touch insurance in our organization. It's so complicated. And we know that she's good at it. And so our business model has been, if you have a question about insurance or you want the laws changed, please go see Amy Bach in United Policyholders. So I would like to welcome Amy to the podcast, and I'm so happy that she's here with us today. Once again, welcome Amy Bach to How to Disaster. In the intro, I actually talked about how insurance is super complicated and it's a huge factor in disaster recovery. And in our organization, we absolutely don't touch it. And every single time, we just direct them over to you. So I wanted to have you on the podcast today to talk to us about United Policyholders, your origin story for the organization, but also like, how did you even get into this work? And then we'll go into the buckets of where you guys are very effective and making a big difference, not only for people who've already undergone disaster, but for people who are in disaster vulnerable areas, which is pretty much everyone at this point. So Welcome, Amy.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. It's really a pleasure to be on with you and discussing these important topics that we have up close and personal experience with.
So talk to us first about how a United Policyholders was founded, your mission, and then we'll start there. And then I'm going to get a little personal because I'm always interested in how people get into this work.
Right. So I am kind of an accidental disaster expert and a very intentional insurance consumer expert. So, the organization was founded in 1991 by myself and somebody who was working for an insurance company as a claim adjuster for most of her career. And you kind of shorthand describe her as a whistleblower. So she came out of working for a major insurance company for her whole career. She had gotten to the point where she was a claims supervisor. They had her working in the Santa Cruz Mountains after the Loma Prieta earthquake that was in 1989. And she had her little team, and they would be going in and inspecting people's damaged homes and determining whether or not the insurance company owed them money to repair their damage. And of course, in insurance, there's something called a deductible, which is a dollar amount that the homeowner has to absorb before the insurance company will cut a check. And so what was happening was that this woman, Ina DeLong, felt that the insurance company was intentionally cheating people. She felt that they were doing that by not training their adjusters on how to find structural damage. Structural damage is usually more expensive than cosmetic. Cosmetic is, slap a coat of paint on, call it a day. Structural is take off the drywall, see what's going on behind the wall, maybe do some engineering, a lot more expensive. So her feeling was that that even though they had entrusted her with determining how much the insurance company owed these people, she felt like she couldn't do her job because her team didn't have tools. They literally didn't have levels to see whether the home was still in alignment. And so she went out and bought some levels, and she made a little training tape, and the company penalized her, seized the tape. And so she quit. She came to a law office where I was working, and as a lawyer helping policyholders. At the time, I was representing a family whose 2-year-old had fallen into their pool and had severe brain damage. They wanted to take care of the kid at home. Their insurance company said, you don't have enough home health coverage to supplement your personal time. So I was battling that out for the family, trying to get the insurance company to pay what we felt they owed for the home health care. So because my background was in public policy, before I became a lawyer, I had been working for something called the New York State Consumer Protection Board. They put me as the insurance analyst at that time because no one else wanted to touch that boring topic. And I was game. And lucky for me, right after I had taken that gig, working for this state agency under the first Governor Cuomo, insurance issues got very hot in New York. And I got very involved in trying to protect consumers in the face of overreaching by insurance companies. So, I had seen in 1985 that there really wasn't a place for insurance consumers to go to get the straight scoop on what their rights are, and translating insurance lingo so people would be able to actually understand their situation after they had a loss and figure out how much money their insurance company owed them, and then do whatever they needed to do to get paid. And, of course, when I was younger, I was a little bit more fiery and thought, oh, insurance companies are, they're evil and all that. I don't feel that way at all anymore. Insurance companies are businesses, right? So really, UP came out of to fill a void. There was no. There are lots of consumer groups out there talking about lemon laws and talking about just all kinds of consumer protections against credit card fraud and identity theft and all that. But when it comes to insurance, it's got its own kind of world. And I thought, you know what, we need a consumer group that just focuses on insurance, right? But when I got together with Ina DeLong, we had, and then we sort of had this kind of nuts and bolts idea of, okay, insurance consumers need a voice, and they need where decisions are being made, you know, in legislatures and the courts, but they also need a voice in the claim process after disaster.
Sorry, my dog is snoring, which happens on a lot of podcasts.
Uh-huh.
Keep going. So, okay, keep going. If you didn't hear, okay.
Am I boring your dog?
No, she is just lazy, and she's a giant English Mastiff, and snoring is like her third talent in life.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay, so there I am, you know, with my day job, but with this already I considered myself and have been a professional insurance consumer advocate since 1984. So everything I've done has been, you know, to kind of get better at that, right? To really understand how insurance works, and then be able to offer consumers practical solutions that are realistic, right? Because, you know, the insurance industry is tremendous, very resourced, very complicated. There's many players. There isn't one insurance voice. There's many, right? And so, you know, so right when I got introduced to Ina, and she was kind of looking to do something to help consumers on the post-disaster side, and I was looking to do something other than litigation, which is a slog and wasn't really the best use of my talents, we decided to form a nonprofit. And we literally had just picked the name when the Oakland fire hit. And at that time in 1991, that was the biggest urban structure destroying wildfire in history. And it was you know, because it destroyed a lot of high net worth homes in the Berkeley Hills, lots of professors, professionals, lawyers. It was a very, it was a community that was ripe for organizing and ripe for helping. And so from the beginning, from the time United Policyholders was formed, our primary focus has been on helping make insurance work for people who have been impacted by disasters, and with a special focus on wildfires. So that's a long answer.
Oh, it's you know, but I think it's an answer that's worthy of the cause. Like, I also, you know, one of the things that I would always like people to see is you can see a gap, and you saw a huge gap. And then if your talents can actually step in and fill that gap, and you have the talent and inclination, that is wonderful. Executing it is tough though. And executing it for a really long time is even more difficult, because you have to have a mindset constantly of learning, pivoting, figuring it out, listening. And one of the things that I said in the intro was that, you know, in disaster, you have, you know, everyone rushes in and love is in the air. And then a year later, everybody like starts to back away, step away. And 18 months later, they're pretty much back to doing what they were doing. And then that's when you have the people who are actually rebuilding their homes, if that's their choice, or, you know, still negotiating with their insurance companies. And then in my case, like, we look up and you're still there. So you are not only there before, you are there during, and you're there for the long term. And there's a huge dearth in that area. So I don't think that was too long of an answer. You know, this is complicated and it's really important. So you could talk, I could just even be quiet for the next 45 minutes. And it would be fine. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Jennifer, you know, because, you know, the focus of the Rebuild North Bay Foundation, you know, had been like, let's get money in people's hands so that they can do repairs and rebuilding, which is a very honest recognition of the reality that, you know, after a wildfire, after a disaster that has either severely damaged or destroyed your home, the one thing you need is money. And then the other thing you need is information, right? Reliable information. Because, and so, you know,
go all the way into reliable information though, and talk about why that's so important. Because one of the reasons, like, I know that I can trust your organization. So I have zero issue just being like, oh, you have an insurance question? Go see United Policyholders. That's who you need to see. You, not us, not anybody else. Go see you. So talk about why that's so important, especially for a community or people who've just undergone trauma. Like, it has to
Yeah. Well, the aftermath of disasters, some people have described it as, I mean, depending on the size, but as the circus comes to town. And by that, I mean, people will come in, contractors will come in, public adjusters will come in, entrepreneurs will come in, and all kinds of personalities surface in the aftermath of a disaster. And meanwhile, there's the survivors, the victims, just kind of going, okay, who can I trust? And for our organization, we have worked very hard to find the people that you can trust. So we always start with government, because of course the local government has the responsibility for public safety, and has the resources to communicate with all the impacted households. And
hold on. Often they don't know how to do it though, because they've never undergone it themselves before. So having an organization like yours come in and also helps your trusted partners navigate something that they may have never done before, which is not the case in Sonoma County, but is in the case in a lot of places now. It was the case in 2017. So I just want to say that there's a reciprocal relationship with the public sector. It should be your first line of resources, but you also provide a trusted partnership to them. So I just have to highlight that because I think it's incredibly important.
Yes, thank you. And again, it's interesting when you look at what our model, how our model developed. It was we partnered with the city of Oakland and Alameda County, first and foremost. They set up there's generally there's going to be an assistance center that gets set up. The sort of post-wildfire playbook has really developed a lot over the time that our organization has been around. So there really is there is a playbook. I mean, on the other hand, there are all kinds of factors that make each disaster different, right? And there's a saying, every disaster is local. And by that, the way I interpret that is, who's taking a leadership role from government, who's taking a leadership role from the philanthropic sector, and who's taking a leadership role from the construction sector. So, the Builders Exchange, the Builders Association, and so, those are going to be different. We had a situation in Colorado where we came in after a wildfire, and the wildfire had hit the county and the city. So some houses were destroyed in the county and some in the city, very much like Sonoma. So who's the boss? Is it the county commissioners? Is it the mayor of the city? Are they going to get along? Are they going to play nicely? And those things really make a difference. And so in this Colorado situation, there was bad blood between the city and the county, and the county official, that we partnered with, we will always look for the partner who's grounded, who has, who's humble enough to know what they don't know, and who keeps the focus on what matters, which is, clearing.
We like to say, avoid the heroes. Avoid them, because they will burn out and they will overpromise and underdeliver. And so, we're always like, we are not heroes, we are not saviors, we are not here to lead your recovery. We are here to inform it, support it, and give you adaptable systems. So,
exactly. And I really appreciate that you see that, because how many conversations I've had with like a county commissioner, for example, we'll connect with somebody like, Doug Teeter in Butte County, lost his home in the Camp Fire, right? That was one of the first calls that I made after the Camp Fire, 18,000 structures down. A supervisor from Napa that we had worked well with made the call to her colleague who was a Butte County supervisor. We had a great chat. He was one of those people that can simultaneously handle their own personal recovery and helping others. That's kind of a post-disaster gem that we always look for. And he was one. And, but back to this Colorado story, our county commissioner that we were partnering with out there, when she went to tour some burn sites that were on city that were within the city limits, the city officials threatened her and said, you're out of your jurisdiction and we're going to call the sheriff if you don't leave, which to me was sort of like, that was kind of rock bottom of the example of people not cooperating and not playing well. Another example is the for-profit entrepreneurs that will come in and say, oh, I came down from Canada, and we have this, we've got the solution, we're going to be your hero, and people are like, okay, wow, great. And the next thing somebody has hired this guy and he's skipped town, and the guy's $80,000 out of pocket and doesn't have a house, and the guy that said that he was going to be his hero turned out to be more than a zero, like an 8.
And but this happened after our fires. We had a guy come from Canada, from Fort McMurray. It's the guy, right?
Yeah,
and met with everybody. And I sat down with him twice, and he was very aggressive.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, I'm going to show you all of here's our website. I went and looked at his website, and they were selling basements, like home things. And so I was like, that's it. That means he doesn't know anything about our recovery. He is not a savior. And I told people, step away, but not everybody did. But that kind of thing, though, where we're talking about this, I'm glad to know we're talking about the same person.
We are talking about the same thing, because it's, when I said, people talk about the circus coming to town, it's we spend a lot of time at United Policyholders trying to put things in a way that an overwhelmed, traumatized person can absorb, right? And striking the right balance between optimism and warning is a challenge, right? You don't want to say to people, trust no one. You want to say, trust but verify. And it's hard because, people come in with these sales pitches and they sound great. We know how to do this, and, we're going to make it easy for you. Well, what more does a disaster victim want to hear? That somebody's going to make it easy? Great, right? And so we're always trying to okay, we want to keep our minds open. If somebody has a great idea, I don't want to say no. On the other hand, there's really nothing new under the sun when it comes to what does it take, to get from standing in the rubble of your burnt lot, to sitting in a new living room, right? What does it take? That's what we define as long-term recovery, right?
Isn't it like, how do we get you all the way home?
Right.
And in a way that's respectful and responsible and not overly prescriptive.
Well, that prescriptive is the key word, because there's no one path that works for everybody. And that's what we have learned over the years. And I've not seen a magic wand yet. I've seen people say, oh, I got lucky, my adjuster was really nice, and they cut me a check, no strings attached, and I just took that check and I went on. I didn't have to deal with the insurance company anymore. That happens all the time. Sometimes insurance companies come through great. And, our goal is to have, of course, them all come through great all the time. I don't think that's ever going to happen, because the reality is that, the insurance system, the insurance companies have a very serious kind of conflict of interest when it comes to large losses, right? Because, auto claim, $5,000, no problem, out the door, we're done. You want $1 million out of an insurance company, you're going to have to jump through some hoops. Mm-hmm. And we are here to help people jump through those hoops. If the hoops are too big or unreasonable or unfair, we try to remove them. And, we're here to give people our tagline is empowering the insured, right? So we have a pretty specific focus, right? On you have insurance. We want you to get every dime. We want to help you get through the pain process as painlessly as possible. But we need you to be realistic about the fact that insurance companies, they're not social workers. Their ads are ads. They don't have a magic wand. They are not your neighbor. They are not your friend. They're a business, and they have shareholders, and they have their own nut. They have to, they've got to pay their employees. So they've got shareholders that they're responsible to. They've got their own financial needs they need to meet. And then they have their policyholders, their customers, right? So that's those are three masters that insurance companies serve, right?
Well, they have
So
reinsurance is a whole other thing. We don't have to get too deep into it here, but until I vacationed once in Bermuda, I didn't even know what reinsurance was. And I ended up at a wedding with people who were reinsurance people. So there is a whole other hidden side. Not like in a negative way, just in a way that most, like from a policy holder, you don't really think about it until the reinsurance companies are saying they're not going to insure the insurance companies because of the risk.
That's right. So that is, in fact, so reinsurance being insurance that insurance companies buy, basically, for their really high dollar exposures. The reinsurance industry is driving some of what's going on in California with people having trouble keeping their home insurance and being able to afford their home insurance.
Fannie Mae, the largest provider of mortgage finance in the U.S., owns 1 out of every 4 loans in the country. You can find out if Fannie Mae owns your mortgage at knowyouroptions.com by using our loan lookup tool. This last year has been quite difficult, and making your mortgage payments could be too. There are options for those available that may have experienced a natural disaster such as wildfire or the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the options available is a forbearance plan, where homeowners are given a period of reduced or suspended payments to manage a temporary hardship of financial standing. For this caused by natural disaster or COVID-19 pandemic, you could be eligible for a 6-month extension with a possibility of another 6 months after that. During the forbearance plan, the homeowner is not charged late fees. If you received additional living expense assistance after your disaster, and those funds have run out, you still may be eligible to apply for a forbearance plan. When your forbearance plan ends, your lending or servicer will contact you to see if you need assistance or are ready to resume making your normal scheduled mortgage payments. If you don't hear from them, you should proactively reach out. If you are unable to repay the balance in its entirety, you may arrange a repayment plan, or if eligible, qualify for other programs such as a payment deferral or flex modification. A payment deferral allows you to bring your mortgage current. This option keeps your monthly mortgage payment the same as it was before your hardship, and the total deferred amount will be due on the last scheduled payment of the loan. Should you sell or refinance, the deferred balance is included in the remaining amount due. Flex modification is Fannie Mae's standard modification. Provides 20% principal and interest payment reduction on your mortgage. Once the modification is complete, the loan's term is extended to 40 years. Depending on the circumstances, the modification may result in a reduction of interest rate and/or principal forbearance. What is a principal forbearance, by the way? And that's when a portion of the unpaid principal balance, basically the remaining loan amount, is put into an interest-free balance secured by the loan as part of the flex modification. It can be modified by the maturity date or with an early payoff. More information is available at knowyouroptions.com. When ready to request mortgage assistance, reach out to your mortgage company. This is the company you send your payments to each month, and you'll find that phone number on your mortgage statement. Additional relief assistance is available through our disaster response network. Here, impacted homeowners can work with HUD-approved housing counselors to get help requesting financial relief through FEMA, insurance claims, and more. Homeowners can visit knowyouroptions.com/relief for more information or call 877-833-1746. Once again, 877-833-1746 or knowyouroptions.com.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of my long and very interesting interview with Amy Bach, the founder and executive director of United Policyholders. You know, insurance is at least 40 to 50% of how a community recovers. And so in this case, we are going to break this episode into 2 parts. I hope that you'll join us for the second part, where Amy and I go a little more deeper into the question of, what is needed in disaster and how can we better respond and collaborate and prepare for disasters as we go. So thank you again for joining us, and please join us for part 2. Thank you for joining us on How to Disaster, a playbook to recover, rebuild, and reimagine. I want to leave you with this one thought. Thank you for spending your time with us. And we want you to know that you can get through this. You can recover, rebuild, and reimagine. But there's only one way you're going to do it, and that's together.